Hi, I'm Scott Smith, and I'm the author of Fixing America, where I propose the Financial Freedom Plan. What we're going to talk about in this video is the source of inflation. Where does inflation come from? The Financial Freedom Plan would make changes to the tax system and to the banking system that would help to slow inflation. It would dramatically change the rate of inflation. We need to understand where inflation comes from to understand why the Financial Freedom Plan could help in this area when nothing else that Congress is doing is helping. Inflation has eroded the lives, the standard of living of the vast majority of Americans, certainly 80% of them, for decades now, and it's been picking up. It's been getting worse. If you look at what you'd have to earn today in order to have the equivalent standard of living of somebody earning minimum wage in the 80s, it's appalling. Inflation is going faster than wages. In other words, people's income are not keeping up with the cost of living. That's that sensation that you're falling behind. It's important to understand where inflation comes from to understand how you can end it. And that's not well understood. It's certainly not in the partisan dialogues out there. The blame is cast for inflation on ways that will win a constituency for a politician, but has nothing to do with the real problem of inflation. Here's where inflation comes from. Three main sources. One is an expanding money supply. We'll talk about what that is. And the other two are the effect of taxes at each layer of the supply chain, and perhaps even more importantly, the effect of the cost of financing, which is inflation, or which is the interest, and also the equity returns that are sometimes exacted out of the companies that are purchased by a PE fund. Let's go through the money supply first. There was a lot of discussion around blowing up the money supply when the Fed did quantitative easing. Quantitative easing was just the creating of money out of thin air in large amounts and pumping that money into the economy by buying treasury bonds and mortgage-backed securities. And indeed, when they did quantitative easing, the stock market just went through the roof. The value of all those financial assets going through the roof spills over into the rest of the economy and inflates the price of the goods and services you buy. Why? Because the money supply is much more than M1, M2, just the amount of money in a bank, in banks, etc. The money supply is the total value of all monetary equivalents out there. So when we've allowed people to start printing crypto and creating coins out of thin air, and those coins increase in value, that's inflationary. That's just more money in the money supply. When PE ratios dramatically swing on Wall Street and the price of a company goes from maybe 15x to 50x or 100x, that's increasing the money supply. In other words, the entire game of the monetary economy of creating paper value and growing that value and trading that value and creating derivative securities out of all that, that is just blowing up the money supply. And that is a large part of where inflation comes from today. Here's the irony. The people who own those financial assets, they actually benefit from inflation. the rate of growth there is faster than inflation. Those people are moving ahead. That's roughly 10% of the American citizens out there benefit from inflation, whereas 80% dramatically lose. Another 10% are sort of marginally in the middle. The other place that inflation comes from is the actual inflation of the price of goods because of the impact of the monetary economy on the supply chain. Let's start with interest. You look at your house, when you buy a house, and you get a mortgage, and you pay it for 30 years, you end up paying 2 times as much to the bank for the interest than you did to the builder who built the house. In other words, the cost of interest is adding to the cost of your house, significantly so, paying more to the bank than the builder. There is no difference for the financing that occurs throughout the rest of the supply chain. Every single thing in the supply chain is financed, whether it's a mine, or it's a factory melting metal, or it's a manufacturing facility, or it's a fleet of trucks delivering those goods. Entire supply chain is financed all the way down the road, and it has the same issue that financing your house is. Over time, we spend more money on interest than we do on the actual infrastructure in the supply chain. It's not just the supply chain, the infrastructure that's financed, it's the corporations, it's the companies, it's everything in there. Then you go back to the supply chain and you add in the cost of taxes and how that impacts the goods. You can calculate anywhere from 50 to 75% of the cost of anything you buy came from the monetary economy. The cost of finance and the taxes are out there. It isn't the wages of the guys producing it. It's not the people actually owning it and building it and inventing the technologies. It is actually the financial operating system that supplies the material economy and the supply chain that creates inflation. You think about how the Fed tries to fight inflation by raising interest rates. You're raising an important line item in the entire supply chain. That does not bring inflation under control, other than it's like a train wreck. It makes things so expensive that people can't buy things, and demand goes down, and you artificially dent inflation barely for a little while. It's not actually a solution. Tariffs increase the cost of the supply chain. It's everything that the parties propose is actually inflationary. The financial freedom plan would be anti-inflationary. And we can talk more about how the financial freedom plan does that. I'd refer you to the website fixingamerica.us. I talk about inflation in my book, Fixing America. And you don't need to buy the book. You can go to the website, or you can watch these videos. I ask you to share these videos with other people. The only way the financial freedom plan is going to rise in the mainstream media is if there's enough shares and enough following developing around these videos. I'm committed to putting out videos constantly explaining what's really going on in the economy and how we can actually solve it through the financial freedom plan. The only part you need to do on this is share and like, and we can get the word out. It becomes self-evident. We have a hope that Congress can pass the financial freedom plan. The hope lies in the fact that every group I've talked to, whether conservative or liberal, they like it equally. It is truly a nonpartisan plan, and that's the only reason that I have hope that down the road the financial freedom plan could actually be passed by Congress. Thank you.